Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Neglect Matters campaign. This 1 hour lunch and learn session will focus on adolescent neglect. We'll begin with a presentation from Inspector Dave Bentley from Surrey Police on understanding and tackling adolescent neglect. This will be followed by a film clip sharing a social worker's view on contextual safeguarding before Julie Speed and Gabi Schaper speak about Surrey's approach to adolescent safeguarding. Margaret Gallagher, NSPCC Head of Local Campaigns, will then update on some of the NSPCC resources on adolescent neglect. This final lunch and learn session will conclude with a video presentation from our GCP2 project manager. The format of the team's live sessions is such that you cannot verbally interact with the presenters, but please do feel free to send any questions through the Q&A option. These will be collated at the end of the session and answers sent out to you. We would encourage you all not just to listen to these sessions, but to use this information to help us all improve the lives of children, young people and their families in Surrey. Thank you very much. Inspector Bentley.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. Apologies you can't see me as issues with our police firewall, we believe. So unfortunately, you've just got my voice today. My name's Dave Bentley. I'm an inspector here. I work in the Woking area of the Borough Commander, but I've got a real interest in helping young people in our community, and I wanted to go through a few issues around adolescent neglect today to kick us off. Next slide, please. So actually, adolescent neglect, there's problems within the title itself, really, and its definition. It hasn't really got a definition by its own very nature, certainly from the law itself. It's termed more neglect than childhood neglect, which is the issue. And how do you define the relevant elements of neglect for adolescents, and how do you define the elements of what is an adolescent and what age groups that then brings into it? There's various different discussion points and different themes that fall into adolescent neglect, and I feel personally that there is a difference between this type of neglect and actual child neglect, because child neglect itself focuses on, the younger and takes you to the younger thought process of children. But on the screen, you'll see a definition from the government now back a while ago now, from 2006, in relation to neglect. Apologies if it's a bit small, but it talks about providing adequate food, clothing, shelter, providing protect a child from physical or emotional harm, ensuring adequate supervision, ensuring access to medical care and treatment, and it all may also include neglect of unresponsiveness to a child's basic emotional need. But really, through this presentation, I'm going to discuss and talk about, actually ask some questions about, do we actually understand what young people need from their parents in their adolescence, and what constitutes adolescent neglect? Next slide, please. So what does the research say? I found a report from the Children's Society, this back in 2016, which is worth a read. Chance. 1 in 7 of the 14 to 15-year-olds that lived with an adult caregivers felt that they were neglected in the study that they spoke to, in one or more ways. And what does that actually mean? In what kind of scenarios? They felt that they were shown little or no interest in them, no warmth, no encouragement, no effort to monitor or protect them, and failed to promote their health. Neglected young people reported low level of well-being, higher propensity than their peers of behaving in ways which may jeopardise their health or prospectus going forward. Next slide, please. So, more importantly, how can we tackle adolescent neglect? And the way I view this is in 2 ways. There's a pursue element and a prevention element. I'll start with the pursue. So, being open and honest about the... Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, brilliant. So being open and honest around the legislation that's currently in place, does it reflect to support this type of neglect in our modern society? Do we need new, updated legislation? And I refer back to the domestic violence legislation that we've seen introduced recently around coercive and controlling behaviour, and the fantastic input that has given us on societal changes in relation to family life and the need to undertake new legislation to make sure that we're safeguarding people. We need to recognise the impact of this type of neglect on society. What does society believe and think about this neglect? And then we need to use other legislation enforcements where available to help and support this kind of neglect. So I'm talking here about ensuring that children who attend school need to attend school, ensuring that we use other levels of enforcement and legislation outside the current laws for policing to ensure that we can tackle adolescent neglect appropriately. And then prevention. So recognising trauma at the earliest point, and I'll talk a bit more about trauma next in terms of adverse childhood experiences, but recognising it at the earliest point, providing that help and support to the family environment is really key. Setting the standard, and again talking about what does society expect from our parental requirements for adolescents, and what do we expect as society, and raise that bar to make sure other people meet that standard. Work as a partnership in delivering support for families who are experiencing difficulty, and there are lots of those. It's important that we help them as much as possible. And how do we enact behaviour change in others? What behaviour do we want to change? What do we want to be adopted? How do we do that? And having those discussions as partners about how can we change those behaviours. Next slide, please. Now, I wanted to talk about ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. Again, I'll ask a couple of pertinent questions. So this is a methodology, I would have thought most of you would have heard of ACEs. It's a methodology that's started in the United States, and is the research came over to here in South Wales, and looking at traumatic events that children experience in their early years in life then affect how they deal with certain situations going forward. Now, there's a number of ACEs here within the boxes on the screen, the top boxes, and it's really around the removal or the reduction of that trusted adult within a family environment for that young person, and the detriment that it can have to what they choose to do going forward. So domestic violence, witnessing domestic violence in a home environment in their early years, substance abuse of the parent, not of the child, mental illness of the parent, parental separation and divorce, incarceration of a parent, and then we talk about emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and here emotional neglect and physical neglect that we've highlighted. Now, the study and the research was focused on more if young people had experienced 4 or more ACEs. They were certain times more likely to be involved in negative health outcomes or criminal justice system. However, in my opinion, it doesn't need an accumulation of ACEs. It can just be one significant traumatic event, which then changes the way in which they develop or make their decisions going forward. A couple of questions I'd like to pose here is there a link between ACEs and adolescent neglect? And if so, what is that? And do we consider ACEs as a precursor or an indicator for adolescent neglect? So can we see the adolescent neglect happening if we look hard enough at the ACEs in the life of young people and families before it happens? Next slide, please. So how do young people present with ACEs, adverse childhood experiences? So you might have seen these through your interactions with young people and through families, but they're always in a state of readiness to fight or flight. Their ability to deal with toxic stress, the gap between calmness and fight or flight is shorter than somebody who hasn't experienced ACEs. They experience anxiety with most situations. They're impulsive, they're hard to engage with. Poor education or attainment. Hot-tempered individuals, and again find it hard to build those meaningful, long-lasting relationships and friendships. It's that removal of that trusted adult in their lives, which makes it extremely difficult for them. But this quote on the side of the slide is really important for me. But there's nothing inevitable about criminality or poor outcomes in life, and as a partnership and as work, we can help and support these young people and families out of these dealing with these situations. So next slide, please. So how does adolescent neglect link to ACEs? So the points below, and I'll go through them, relate to what are the kind of consequences of ACEs? How do people present? What are the risks of having ACEs? These are the ones that I feel relate to adolescents and what I've seen in my policing career through adolescents. So the adoption of high health risk behaviours, high risk sexual behaviour, drug use, alcohol abuse, self-harm, increased risk of violence as a victim or as a suspect, as a person who commits it, mental health conditions, including suicide or depressive disorders, higher level involvement in the criminal justice system, and unfortunately early death. Those are all, in my opinion, consequences of adverse childhood experience in adolescence and how they might manifest in adolescent neglect. So in summary, again, I've had some pertinent questions really of us and just hopefully some thought-provoking ones about what work we could maybe look at going forward. But in summary, do we need a partnership definition of adolescent neglect? Are we all aware of what it means and how we can tackle it together by having that definition, because it is so difficult to define in some terms? How can we use trauma to spot adolescent neglect before it happens? And there's a number of individual work ongoing across Surrey looking at ACEs and how to spot ACEs at the earliest possible point. And let's be honest about our current legislation. Is it enough to tackle this type of neglect? If not, and how can we change it? How do we increase societal standards on parenting? A really difficult one, and I don't have the answer. I'm not here telling you I have the answer, but one where I think we should be striving to get the answer for. Do we have the appropriate support in place to offer help to the families who need it the most? And for me, the key to all of this is working in partnership to support those in need, but also to pursue those that don't put our young people at the heart of what they're trying to do in the short and the long term. Next slide, please. I have got an any questions slide next, but I realise that this is a live event and I will be answering questions slow time. So please send me any questions you like. Happy to answer them later on. Thank you very much.
Okay, so for example, I would be saying you've got yourself a young person and they're doing the most of saying, you see you walk in, there's the hood, you sniff that nice perfume, I call it eau de cannabis, you're sniffing that stuff there. You know what you're dealing with from day dot. He's assessing you from the minute you walk through that door, how you walk, what you say, how you're going to say it. So now there are two things that will happen here. It's either you challenge him and say straight away, sorry, what? Have you been smoking something or whatever? Already what he's thinking there is, so you've walked from my door, come and tell me in my home that I'm smoking something or whatever it is, yeah? So you're already judging me. Me and you haven't even started talking, but you've already judged me. So already the barrier you've put up yourself by already saying that you've barricaded it already. However, if you walk through the door and you sit down, he's probably sitting in a corner somewhere, eating whatever he's doing. So you sit down there, he's playing PlayStation, you can sniff that stuff, and you're like, listen, yeah, I'm sorry, but I'm about to pass out, innit? You need to open a window, what's going on here? You know what I mean? Like, what? And then he's like, huh? Do you know what I mean? He's not even expecting you to be, you're like, nah, but me and you both know what you've done in it before I came in here. So like, you need to open a window, because like, listen, after I leave here, my eyes are going to be hazed. So, yo, if I can't even breathe in, you've started the conversation as a humorous conversation. You've invested the first penny, because already he understands, you understand his world. He understands two things. You're not as dumb as you look. And secondly, you know his world without judging him. And he can relate to that. Maybe there's a bit of a right that's your first penny. Then you go in for the kill. Then you sort of say, you know what, yeah, you must get a munch, innit? So where's your stash? you know he's got chocolate somewhere in that house. Where's your stash? He's going to put it out. Trust me, they always do. He's going to pull out a little stash, maybe with chocolate or something like that. So what you saying? So what, you like pianos? A grown-ass boy like it? Look how big you are, you're eating them kind of chocolates. What? And look at them trainers, you know. Oh, Lord, no. And then if he's wearing some next trainers, you're like, nah. You change the subject completely. You go on about the trainers, you're looking for, oh, so what? You got that? What wardrobe? Oh, you play this game. Oh, you play that game. Oh, okay. The next time you come, you say, right, me, yeah, this whole coming to visit you in the house, I can't deal with that, yeah, because, like, the stuffiness, the whole, yeah, nah. What about Nando's, innit? So we're going to sit in Nando's, innit? I'm going to yam my chicken. You're going to yam your chicken. You're going to about to tell me about yourself, innit? Because that's how it's going to run. And then I'm going to tell you about myself. How about that? So you sit there in the car. He's playing his tunes. You ask me, I got Bluetooth. Yeah, I got Bluetooth. All right, let's Bluetooth that shit. And don't be playing any stuff that will get me arrested, you know. Because, like, then he's looking at you and yeah, you're playing music, you're all dancing to that. By the time you get to Nando's, you have now set the scene for something else, something magical to happen. Because by the time you are done with this child, I give you a good 6 weeks, that child will understand you as an adult that they can go to. Even when, and then you pick up the phone from time to time. You've left him now. He's gone. But then you want to keep yourself in his mind. So you pick up the phone early hours of the morning, 10 o'clock, we come into work. Yo, I know you're still asleep. You leave him a nice voicemail. I know you're still asleep, innit? You need to come out of your bed. Yeah, you need college. You going to college today. You need to get out of bed. Oh, yeah, and call me, innit, when you get out. Yeah, bye. You know, and then you leave that. It tells him one thing. You've not forgotten. That was not fake. You've not forgotten him. You are always in the back of his mind. Send a little text message. That's your next penny. Then you start asking him about 4 weeks' time about the stuff you're worried about. Bit by bit, you get there. Right, okay. So you know about them braids, yeah, that you're seeing on road, yeah? You think you're road man, innit? You think you're hardcore. That's the thing, innit? Look how you're walking. And then he's sort of saying, yeah, but, yeah. By the time you're finished with him, he would have told you the friends that he hangs around with, who he is. You would have begun to build a much, much bigger picture. And that picture will help you to build a much more succinct disruption network, because you can map him now. You know he's hanging around with maybe Tony, but maybe he's not doing that out of choice. Maybe Tony has put him in a position whereby he needs to be there. So how would you disrupt that? Moving him away isn't going to change that, because he owes Tony. So whether you move him to Wales, wherever you move him to, he will always come back. He'll run away. And you'll, oh, well, another missing episode. He's always missing. He's not choosing to go missing. There's a much, much deeper picture behind that. But you won't get there unless you invest emotional pennies. So when he's missing now, I had children who were calling me. I had one child. She used to call me, Wilma, I'm missing now. But I'm missing. But yeah, I'll be back. But I just need to tell you I'm missing, get it? And I'm like, why did you do that? So those are the emotional pennies, whereby even when a child is missing, they're calling you, I'm missing, I'll be back. They won't talk to the police. They'll talk to you and tell you they're missing. Okay, where are you coming back from? Where have you gone? You know where I've gone. You don't need to ask me. You know where I've gone. Come pick me up tomorrow. And you go there, you will find the child. And you say, listen, don't waste my time. 10 o'clock, I want to find you there. And you know he's going to go to her mum's. And you start building the emotional pennies by the family as well. That whole family network that they used to have before they left, you come to understand their past, because that's a part of who they are. It's a part of their culture, who they're going to be in future. So you need to invest in that. It's not perfect, but you're going to help that when they leave, and hopefully you've given them enough emotional pennies to hold. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, I'm Julie Speed. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I do. I play Wilma when I really need a pick up to remind me of why we do the work. So Wilma is actually a social worker in Surrey. She works in the Safeguarding Adolescent team down in the southeast of the county. The reason I'm showing you this today is just to think about the emotional pennies that we all invest in the work that we do with children, young people and families. I'll come back to some of the themes that I've pulled out from it. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself. So tomorrow it's very kind of light bite, but hopefully you'll get enough from it. And I wanted to focus on the themes around us prioritising relationships over process, and how that looks in a sort of contextual safeguarding approach when we think about families and peers and the environment that our young people grow up in. So I'm Julie Speed. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the partnership lead for child exploitation and hidden crime. I'm also the sort of single point of contact for contextual safeguarding in Surrey. I work in the Safeguarding Adolescent central team under Lisa Bursell, and we're developing an integrated model with all the different parts of the adolescent work, including the No Wrong Door, the Safeguarding Adolescents, youth justice, and so on. There's not enough time to cover all that today, but I just wanted to mention that. Gabi's also going to come and talk in a little while about some of the approaches. So I will focus mainly on some of the guiding principles. Can I go to the next slide, please? Guiding principles and then sort of the different approaches, and then Gabi will come and talk about the myth-busting element. So let's have a little think about Wilma and the case study that she talked about. Now, I've worked in Surrey for quite a long time, and most of my work's been around adolescents. And for any of us who are close to adolescent, even in our personal professional lives, we just know engagement is everything. Yet I think the relationships that we form with them can be really difficult, but very critical. For me, what I took from Wilma's presentation, it's why I wanted to show you that today, because there's no one template on how to do this work. But yet 6 minutes, Wilma told us things about the importance of language, which is, we talk about that all the time. What, you know, we need to strengths-based language, and we need to use kind of language that doesn't victimise them or criminalise them. But what does that actually mean? Well, she was using a language that related to that child that she was working with. She didn't make him feel bad because he wasn't at school. She didn't make him feel bad because he was smoking cannabis. She didn't make him feel bad about anything. She took a softer approach, didn't she? But not a soft approach in terms of she was tough with them, but she invested those pennies in order to get his attention. You don't need to know the details of what that kid's involved in, but you could have easily have gone in there like, we're worried about this and we're worried about that, but she didn't do that. She went in with them more gently and sided with them. Not saying you have to take every child you work with to Nando's either, but that was what she felt was right at that time, to invest another emotional penny. The other thing is the way you prioritise a child's needs. Now, she saw that there was lots of key risks there. He's gone missing. He's probably involved in criminal exploitation. There's probably lots of other stuff going on. Where's the family in this as well? Where are his peers? He's not going to talk to you about any of those things that we have to go in and disrupt or try and get more intelligence on until you've secured that relationship. And that, for me, in terms of all those different emotional pennies, she'd managed to secure that she understood him, she could prioritise his needs. She did put the relational aspect over process. That's not to say that we don't have processes, but she sort of dropped, you know, the template at the front door and thought, this kid needs to hear what is, you know, from my point of view. And then you know, the impact that would have potentially on his friends and then the family, because we walk away, we're not going to be there forever, we walk away. So she's investing time in the family, who are going to be the key people that take care of this kid beyond that. So everyday guiding principles for safeguarding adolescents is about, would this be good enough for my child? Well, I tell you what, if my child got into trouble and he met Wilma, I'd be more than happy for him to work with somebody like Wilma. And there are lots of Wilmas around, and there are also lots, Wilma works with lots and lots of different children. I don't even think she knows that we're showing this video today. But yeah, it's just, you know, she is there's genuine interest. What kind of adult do we want the young person to be? Of course, that's always going to be a factor, but it might not be when you're constantly in crisis with children and families. And then the key thing here about managing risk for the child, and not always for the organisation, which is that balance that we need to tread finally often. Next slide, please. So I mentioned a bit about the kind of the principles of the safeguarding adolescent approach. We have to sort of focus on the fact that lots of children will go through lots of different risks, lots of different experiences, lots of different things that happen to them. That doesn't necessarily define how they're going to be for the rest of their life. It needs to be about value-based and thinking about the contexts outside of the family. I mean, the stuff that Dave spoke about earlier, and that, you know, a child's behaviour may be really aggressive, maybe really kind of gnarly, maybe, you know, presenting in a way that we just think, right, you know, we can't work with them, they won't engage. And it's always thinking about what's behind that, what's driving that. Is this, you know, something that they've developed and learned, you know, so all that stuff that constitutes to a, you know, that adolescent approach, and that the teenager that they are now may not be the person they are in a few years' time. And I mean, you will know when you get the whole kind of balance in terms of the adolescent brain and the storm and stress. But that's a really important factor in terms of thinking about how we assess the contexts that young people live in, because how much time do you think teenagers actually spend with their family versus how much time they spend at school and with their peers? So go to the next slide, thanks. So the term extra familial harm, or sometimes we talk about it in terms of contextual safeguarding, I think is a really good way of trying to marry up what has traditionally been child protection approaches with thinking about modern day risks and harms that our young people face, predominantly young people, in terms of the environments they inhabit. So when you just think about things like the peer influences, and this doesn't necessarily mean that it's always about harm, but it's that balance between, you know, what happens in the spaces that they occupy. How much time did they spend at school, for example? Where are their sort of experiences formed, and who are their influences? So I mean, that's very straightforward, I guess, in terms of, well, of course we would look at that, and it's not an either or, because if we go to the next slide, and we're thinking about how we look at things in the round in terms of the assessment, you know, there's such a you know, big relationship between, you know, the child, what happens at home. And we're here today to think about adolescent neglect. And I was just sort of reflecting on, you know, so when you assess a child for sort of exploitation risks, you think about things in terms of push-pull factors. So what's pushing the young person out of the home and what's drawing them towards it. And of course, neglect is a big indicator. You know, we do know that a lot of children that end up exploited can have some form of neglect in their background, whether that's because nobody's taken any interest in where they're going missing, nobody's taken any interest in how they're feeling in terms of their own sort of well-being, or, you know, the sort of unsupervised amounts of time online. All that type of stuff can combine to somebody who's maybe pushed out of the home and towards something that may be more attractive, where they get a sense of belonging, where they can earn money, where they can feel like somebody, you know, and that's that sort of balance between the two. The other thing that I wanted is, because obviously I'm thinking about the sort of sharp end, but when you think about examples, and I was reading yesterday in the news about an incident in a school where a group of kids had got some nude photographs of one of their mates and then started to share that around the group. And, you know, in many extents, that feels like a norm that happens, teenagers do that. And it's just thinking about where teenagers' ideas and influences settle, and where they come to believe that sharing nude pictures of people is normal, and that they don't think about the impact that might have, or then the issues around choice and consent and coercion. And that's where you sort of start to think about that sort of extra familial harm, and where the sort of seeds are planted in terms of how we can respond and what happens in peer groups. I'm sort of really moving through this fast, and I'm not going to focus too much. You will get the slides as well, and there's also some links in terms of how you can engage further if you want to know more about contextual safeguarding. So I guess I'll just also, before I hand over to Gabi, I just wanted to think about the investing the emotional pennies, and whether you are somebody who has a one-off contact with young people or whether you have a longer term relationship, just to try and think about where you would invest your emotional pennies in terms of your work with adolescents. So I'm going to finish there and hand over to Gabi.
Fabulous, thank you, Julie. Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gabi Schaper. I'm the safeguarding adolescent consultant throughout Surrey, and I'm also a systemic family psychotherapist, and I work with Julie in the central team developing and rolling out the safeguarding adolescents strategy. So that's what we're doing. Just to comment on something that Julie has said about the push-pull, I think it's so important about building relationships. So a really important thing that we're trying to achieve with the safeguarding adolescents strategy and the way we want everybody to work with adolescents is just to really connect the dots and make sense and move beyond the symptoms and to look at things holistically and see, actually, this is what's happening. I wonder what that's about, and not focus too much or not only on the symptoms, but to engage with people very early on. So if they're going missing and there's a history of neglect, you know, when they were younger and ACEs, as David said, then maybe going missing might elicit some concern from a parent who otherwise is not very emotionally demonstrable. You know, it's quite difficult to know if they care about you or if they don't. If you do some risky things, then maybe you know when people get really worried, even if they shout, even if there's crisis, but there is a response. So that's really interesting. Another thing I just wanted to say about me, really, I've always worked with adolescents, not always, obviously, because I was one at one point, but for a long time now in Surrey, and I think it's really exciting. I previously managed the Edge of Care service in Surrey, and I'm really passionate about, you know, finding a way to engage them. Loved Wilma's video, really made me chuckle. I think it's a good video to show on a Friday. Right, could we have next slides, please? I'm going to take you through some of the kind of myths that we come across quite a lot and just plant maybe hopefully some thoughts on that. So one of the myth is gang culture is rife among young people and it's taken over our schools. And I think that's a really big one for people. People are really worried about that. So, however, when we talk to our children and young people, they tell us that, you know, it's not quite like that. And somebody said to me something in a meeting a few weeks ago, and they say, you know what, joining a gang is not like joining a gym. You know, you don't. It's not a process like that. You kind of slide into it. You know, much more subtly, that there are your mates. You know, your mates are involved with things that at some point you'll find out, actually, you know, they get up to things that maybe they shouldn't. There's this worry, but everybody's doing it. And this connection, as Julie said and Dave said, about, you know, what's going on at home. You know, it offers a sense of belonging. Friends are very important, and then you know, then you're there. So I think what we're trying to achieve with the way we want people to work, or staff to work with young people and their families, is to look at both, to look at the family, you know, and what they can do to have them involved with this very much, to make sure that risks are being talked about, that they show their care and concern and worry for their children in a way that they can hear, and we know that, yeah, that very often, by going missing and things like that, everybody's rejection attachment patterns are triggered, and everybody gets very heightened and very, I reject you before you reject me, and then things get amplified, really. So what we're hoping to do is to get people alongside, doing a formulation to look at actually what is the issue, how do we define what the problem is. Do we think the problem is the same problem as the child would say it? Does mum agree? Would dad agree, or the carers agree? What would school think? You know, and how do we think this problem has come to be? How long has it been there? What can we do? What keeps it going? And how can we move forward? Can we have next slide, please? So the second myth is really the one around, once you're involved in child exploitation, it's very hard to escape. So our very good and kind colleagues from User Voice and Participation have done a lot of work and conversations with people, and what they do tell us is that actually they are worried about their mental health, about the future, very much about, you know, what am I going to do to earn money? What's the job going to be? Money, you know, how safe do I feel? And I think particularly when we look at the demographic of young people who are involved in child exploitation and who we would be very worried about, and how they link with the young people who are not in education or who have left education a while ago, and we say, actually, how do you see your future? How can we help you have a structure? How can we help you get back in there? People lose their confidence that they can achieve. They have very negative views very often of themselves, you know, so it's difficult to see a future that where they can be independent and safe. Okay. The other thing to say, really about not getting out and not wanting to be called, not recognizing child exploitation is very often something that we come across. And children say, actually, these are my mates. What are you talking about? I'm not a victim. I'm not being exploited. These are my friends. And something we're really trying to push is to get along, as Wilma said in her video, we need to get alongside young people and alongside you know, families, and to understand who are your friends, you know, who are there, and to do an assessment with them of the positive things of those friendships, as well as the risky things, and think together about what would make you worried about this. And partnership working with this is obviously so important to have a comprehensive partnership response in a professional way. So to work with education partners and police and health and, you know, maybe community resources. We can speak to people at the local co-op or the park or whatever, but to also have parents as partners and young people as partners, and doing plans with them together in a way that is relevant to them. And in my experience, if you talk about something in a way that is respectful and that is relevant to people, they will engage if you persist. And I think very, very important, what Wilma also said, and I think she said it ever so well, is, you know, people need to know that you genuinely care and that we have them in mind. And it's not always about needing to see each other face to face, but to show that you have them in mind, that you haven't forgotten. Thank you. Could I have next slide, please? So this third one is about disrupting. And is it just for the police, really? And as we just said, of course it's not. You know, but I think there is a myth around it that, you know, we can only do this with legislation, with you know, in that way, which no doubt is helpful, but it needs to go across all the agencies and across families and young people, and we need to involve them. So in Surrey we have many risk management meeting forums where we talk about places, where we talk about children, where we talk about friendship and patterns and who spends time with who and why we would be worried about it and what we can do about it in a legislative way, but also how we can talk to families to help them keep their children closer and make it safer, and how we can, you know, talk to the child in terms of, actually, if you're out and about and you're getting really worried, here's a safe place you can go to. If you know, and this is where we need to have community things set up, like, I don't know, Boots or the co-op or whatever, where they can go and when things feel risky for them. So the conclusion for this one is really to, if we want to improve that, we need to think beyond the usual formulation of police, social care and education, and extend it much more into the community and into families and children's voices, and families' voices are so important with this. Because if we don't know what they think, and the only way we will ever know what they think is if we manage to build relationships with them that enable that, and that make them feel like actually they can tell us, they can trust us. Thank you. Next one, please. Right, so this is about a perceived lack of early intervention to support schools when grooming or other harmful behaviours arise. As Julie said, you know, and I think it's just in the media now, isn't it? You know, this sort of corridor culture and, you know, all these really, you know, shocking statistics we hear about how many girls say that they've been a victim of receiving unwanted, you know, so videos or texts or inappropriate texts. You know, really worrying, and how much that has become normalized. And what do we do with that? So we do actually have an early help program that looks at trauma from backgrounds and ACEs, as David has alluded to. And we do a lot of work with local schools via the youth intervention officers. And at the moment we're trialing that in Woking and Surrey Heath. Yeah, so the other thing I would like to say about that really is linking back to, in terms of early intervention, what David said earlier. So how can we predict, you know, who's this going to become an issue for quite early on? And we know, you know, the ACEs and the kind of neglect patterns, actually we can probably predict quite early on, and there's a lot of work being done at the moment with that, you know, with schools. And I'm not sure if people have heard of the Roni score and trying to kind of profile children who, you know, have multiple areas of vulnerability, and where we keep an eye on it. So if a child has a permanent exclusion, for instance, in primary school, you know, really big red flag. And how do we enable our practitioners, our families, to spot them, to share that information, to see actually this is a child who would need a really solid transition piece from primary to secondary, and to wrap ourselves around that, to speak to the family, to look at generational patterns of, you know, how can we, you know, support a parent who hasn't been parented very well in their family of origin themselves to parent this child. You know, they might need some coaching, some support with it. They might not know what they're drawing on, what they're modeling themselves on. Okay. I'm just mindful of time, and I need to hand over to Margaret in a minute. Could I have next slide, please? Oh, thank you. Sorry, just to say back to the, sorry, actually, could you go back one slide for me? I needed to make one point, sorry. With the early bubbles, in relation to the exploitation concerns, but also in terms of the sort of edge of care concerns, I think is really significant. As you said earlier, as Wilma said in her video, it doesn't help to put them into care. I think that's another big myth. That very often we have this idea that the only safe place is not at home, and we can remove the risk by moving the child somewhere else, which very often, or you know, most of the time, does not have a good result for this child. And we'd be better off working with the family and the system and the community and the child around the presenting issues. Thank you. Next slide, please. Right, so here are some links and some tools. I think you all get the slide pack, so you'll have all of those. There's quite a lot available. We're also in the process of putting together a toolkit just for the safeguarding adolescent part of the world at the moment that people can then use. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief overview. I had to look at this slide earlier. So this is the whole kind of safeguarding adolescent world. So we have the Youth Offending Service, the Missing and Hidden Crimes, No Wrong Door, and that's really a service in development and will hopefully launch beginning of September, dealing with edge of care, edge of hospital admission, edge of custody type presentations. And working in a very hands-on way and preventative way with children and families, and offering mediation and some short-term respite. And then we have the safeguarding adolescent teams and the targeted youth support teams. I think the teams that I'm missing on here, if I'm honest, should be the children looked after team, the care leaving team, and also the assessment teams and the disabled children's teams. We should probably include them because we have adolescents in those teams, and we are rolling out a lot of training and support and workshops for all those people in those teams. Yeah, thank you very much. Is that my last slide? I'm not quite. There you go. Handing over to Margaret. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brilliant. I was just taking some notes myself. So many shared themes from other work we and NSPCC have been doing around neglect across the UK. So delighted to be with you here today for Surrey again. I'm the head of the local campaign service across UK, joint head, and I deliver neglect work in Northern Ireland with the Safeguarding Board. We've been running out work with professionals and into communities to try to deliver on our own neglect strategy. So here to talk about adolescent neglect. So we go to the next slide. I'm really going to briefly go through this piece because we do have, I'm here to talk about the resources that we have. So we have an information leaflet, it's called Core Info. It's done between Cardiff University and the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. It's 2014, but it was one of our most relevant pieces around this. And what we really wanted to look at was what was the voice of children's experiences of children who'd experienced neglect, about how that had impacted on them, and particularly emotional neglect as well. So that's available and that'll be put up on the site. I know that the Surrey safeguarding team will be putting that up after today, so you'll have access to that. But really it gives you a summary of some of the research findings around that. And I think one of the key things there, and we can hear and we've listened to Wilma, I loved that video, absolutely loved it, and that real life experience of being with young people in their lives, creating relationships and connections. I think quite a lot of what we've heard today about those family connections. These aren't, things about tick boxes or assessments in that sense. It's about how do we then work alongside our young people and our families to address the issues that are arising. And I say, we've just heard again how the ACEs impact is there, and also parenting capacity. But that from young people's point of view, we know that this information that came forward in this report was telling us that their behaviours are often interpreted by others as a lifestyle choice or acting out. I would hope that would be less and less now that the ACEs work has been rolled out, and in fairness as well, the trauma-informed work across the UK, that we're beginning to look far beyond the behaviours and much more what are the experiences that has led this young person, particularly as a teenager, to be in a position where their behaviours are coming to the attention and are seen not as the problem but as an indicator of their need. And this information as well in this leaflet will talk to you about how teenagers, their experience of neglect in relation to victimisation, whether it increases the likelihood of them actually perpetrating violence, and also their future expectations. To say, I'm not going to go into detail today, you'll be able to download it afterwards. But the ultimate very simple aim that comes from that review, even at that stage, was that they have a better understanding of teenage neglect and emotional abuse. That we need to have that, and it might enable those teenagers to access information in a timely way and an appropriate way. So just next slide. And again, I'm not going to dwell on all this detail. It will be all available for you on the leaflet. So it reflects on these teenagers, how they view themselves. It doesn't reflect on what happened in their younger years and the impact of their early childhood neglect and abuse. It's outside the scope of the summary for that report. But again, it is very interesting in terms of many of them were out of home care at the time of the studies themselves. Again, linking with the teams there around that missing and in care. So if we move on, yeah, that's fine. I've touched on some of these recommendations. It's about all of us having a better understanding of teenage neglect and that experience, and addressing that, what might be that emotional maltreatment, and not addressing the problems such as their alcohol misuse, or we've seen with Wilma, the drugs misuse, not putting that front and centre, but working to create a plan around how they recover maybe from the traumas they've had and build a future for themselves. Remember, there, as also has been mentioned by other speakers today, so they may be more likely to be more vulnerable to other forms of victimisation, and we've heard that from the team just before me here as well. So, and also hospital emergency departments and mental health providers, when they're coming in crisis, making sure that not just ourselves, who maybe they're coming to attention and other teams in the community, but those that are also dealing with other services are aware of the impact, and we don't see it just as, again, the indicator of the behaviour, but they're well and tuned into what response is appropriate for those teenagers. Because we do, and we even see that with our helpline, many adults contact us about concerns about younger children, about babies, but that tails off as they move into their teenage years. They're more likely to contact us about the child's behaviour as a concern, as opposed to the situation that the children have been living in often for many, many years, and the family context that they're living within as well. So I just actually want to focus next on a piece of work we did, if we move on to A leaflet, again, this is going to be available. It was a resource that was identified in a campaign that we have been doing with our colleagues in other parts of the UK. And in fact, I think, and my geography is not the best on it, but it was in Bedfordshire. And we did a neglect campaign there, and we felt that there wasn't enough or anything that really spoke to young people. They designed this leaflet, they designed the information in it. Again, we're not going to go through it in detail, but that ultimate feeling of feeling invisible, a child who is experiencing, teenagers who experience neglect, felt they were fairly invisible to others. And again, you know, from their lived experience, it's really important we tune into that and we respond to that from what their needs are as well. If we just move to the next slide. This leaflet was distributed in GPs, with schools and sports centres and libraries, as well as online. And there was work done around it as well to try and improve lunch and learn seminars like today around adolescent neglect, to help everyone in the community who's working with families and teenagers in particular to think more from that child's perspective of what neglect might feel and look like to them. So very specific things here. Children wanted words, young people wanted to hear about neglect, and very simple things like where they've been looked after well in terms of being fed, heat, safety, being protected from dangerous situations, and being loved and cared for, and emotional support. And that can be hard for young people to identify. So say if we move on now, this leaflet will be available for download after today. And we also have that bystander, and it can be, even my own experience with my own children, they'll often tell me about other children they've concerns about. So we want to also support children who may not be experiencing that themselves, but who may be concerned about a friend and who they can talk to as well. So it's, again, as you mentioned there, around the contextual, who are their peers? Sometimes their peers are people who maybe are concerned about them, and how do we support them to get help and support? And again, a key thing of the work that's happening here is actually building that circle of trust. Who are the trusted adults? And we do this a lot across a lot of our work. We help young people work out who can they speak to, who do they have a relationship with, who can they talk to about an issue, and who do they trust can support them. And really, really important that they've considered that, and we've supported them to work through who that might be. And if they don't have someone, you know, there's always us, there's always ourselves, our own services Childline, and they do talk to us as well, and some suggestions there. And again, this was driven by young people, about a response from them about how they would like to be spoken to about this. If we just move on quickly as I come to the end, as I realise we have another short video to come on board. We have the link there. It will be put up on the site. I know the team here in Surrey are going to put that up. And again, it's just a tool. It's not going to be a solution on their own. And as I finish off, I will take you to our main website, the next slide, to say that we do speak to children regularly about neglect. This is our 12+ website, childline.org.uk. We had over 170,000 contacts to our service last year, in 1 year alone. We speak to children every day, every night, about the lives they're having. They don't know the words around neglect. It's a professional term. They know what it feels like. They know the impact it has. They're confused. Sometimes they're upset, worried, and we help them articulate that. And we try and help within our website in particular, help them understand what it is when people talk about neglect, what it means. And if you move on to the next slide, some of you may not know, we have an under 12 site, which is childline.org.uk/kids. And that's actually in recognition that we have more children now contacting us at a younger age, right down to 6 and 7 year olds. Not as many, of course, but we needed to develop part of our site that was more aimed at primary schools. And again, we do talk about neglect within this, and all these sites are developed with children and young people, and test out the content with them. But it's there for you to look after today, and perhaps look at and see as a resource for yourselves, and see if it is useful for you. But I say every day of every year, we're listening to children for over the last 35 years through Childline, and it's a very live experience of what the concerns are. And we know that mental health and well-being and emotional well-being are increasing in terms of nearly 40% of all our contacts last year. It's predominantly coming what Childline is dealing with, and there's lots of reasons for that, but certainly neglect is part of that. So we just move now on to the last one. What we'd say is, just always, you know, it's never too late to talk to someone about a child. You might think they're man big, they're over 6 foot, maybe they're a young girl who seems very well able to look after themselves. But if you have concerns, we would encourage everyone to pass on their concerns and to take action to support that child or young person as appropriate. Because we often find in the community, many people think they'll be grand, they'll be able to look after themselves. They're big enough now, you know, they're very confident, they're out and about. Many of these young people, when they ring us, they're very scared about the situations they're in, and their low mood and depression and mental health is a real concern to us at the minute. So I'll just finish off now, I think. Yes, that's me. Hopefully I have time for the video.
Hello, I'm Alex Dove and I'm the project manager for the Graded Care Profile 2 project in Surrey. And I'm here as part of your Lunch and Learn session to tell you a little bit about the Graded Care Profile 2 project and the neglect screening tool in Surrey. As you'll be aware, probably from your session today, neglect is a significant concern impacting on the lives of an estimated 1 in 10 children in the UK. And the challenges in identifying, assessing and intervening when a child is experiencing neglect are many. In Surrey, we know there is much more work to be done to better support neglected children, especially those experiencing chronic neglect and the cumulative harm that comes with this. As such, the Graded Care Profile 2 and the shorter neglect screening tool are being introduced and embedded into practice across Surrey Children's Services, health, education and voluntary sector partners. The GCP2, Graded Care Profile 2, is a licensed tool developed by the NSPCC, meaning practitioners have to be trained and licensed to use it. The tool has a comprehensive framework that requires practitioners to gather evidence and from this evidence measure the quality of care that a child is receiving using a grading scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the best care to 5 being the worst. This tool has been shown to help reduce subjectivity, bias and ambiguity, which we see so often in assessments relating to cases of neglect. It also helps us to answer that tricky question of what good enough care looks like, and to also compare and measure change over time, which in turn informs us about the support and interventions that are required and successful to support the child and family. The tool can be used, and we'd encourage it to be used across the partnership from universal through to specialist services, so that we can help families as early as possible when concerns of neglect start emerging, and hopefully therefore prevent children from experiencing significant harm as a result. But where professionals from Universal and Early Help Services complete a GCP2, and this results in concerns of moderate or severe neglect, then the GCP2 should be used to support the request for support to Surrey's Children's Single Point of Access. Practitioners can use the tool individually, but it also lends itself well to be used by multiple partners within existing structures such as Team Around the Family and core groups. When multi-agency teams use the tool, a holistic and detailed picture of the child's lived experience can be gained, helping professionals to take the most appropriate action together to improve outcomes for the child and the family. So if you're interested in attending a Graded Care Profile 2 training, please book your place on one of the many upcoming courses via Olive. In particular, we'd like to see as many social workers, family support workers, health visitors, home link workers, designated safeguarding leads, inclusion officers, school nurses and youth workers attend. If you're from a partner agency who has limited contact with children and families, then it's unlikely you'll be able to use the GCP2 in its entirety, which is why we've developed a shorter and briefer neglect screening tool too. This tool can be downloaded from the Safeguarding Children's Partnership website by anyone, and it can help you to identify whether neglect may be present in a family that you come into contact with and what to do as a result. This tool can also be used as part of your evidencing of concerns when making a referral to Surrey's Single Point of Access. We cannot continue simply doing what we're doing currently when it comes to those children who are experiencing neglectful care. So we really hope and believe that these tools will help you to help more children who are experiencing neglect, both earlier and with a more sustained impact. So if you're interested in either GCP2 or the neglect screening tool, please have a look at the Surrey Safeguarding Children's Partnership website, or please speak to myself, Alex Dove, for more details. Thanks very much.
Thank you all for joining us today. We hope that you'll take something from this session into your daily practice and for ongoing discussion to improve your awareness and your work around childhood neglect. We will leave you with 3 slides from the Surrey Children's Services Academy that details the learning offer, including workshops on neglect. Any further questions can be directed to the partnership team inbox, details in the Q&A chat. The recordings from these Lunch and Learn sessions will be downloaded and available to view on the SSCP website at the end of the month. Thank you very much.